done projects that have been really good, and I have done projects that have bombed. And I will never do them again, ever. But isn't that kind of what teaching's all about, right? We strive for perfection, and we're a little bit perfectionist. But at the end of the day, let's be honest, we always make mistakes, right? And so we need to own that. And so I want to tell everyone that whenever you decide to do project-based learning, you will mess up. Let's just own that for a minute, okay? There's this weird thing of, it has to go perfectly right. No, it won't. It won't. Let's just own that. Let's move forward. It will go well, and my job is to work with you to make sure that when you do implement that project, that it hopefully isn't a catastrophe, but there will be some bumps in the road. But that's how it is whenever you're trying something new out. I want to start us off with an activity that we actually do in the 101. And you may have actually, and I think actually most of you have done a similar activity. And so I don't want to take too long on it, but I do want to at least open up with this activity. What I want you to think about is your ideal graduate. And so here, in this live studio audience, if you will, we'll talk about that at our tables and generate what your ideal graduate is. For those back home, feel free to do the same thing at your tables. Talk about what your ideal graduate is. Those could be knowledge, those could be skills, dispositions. I'm going to leave it very open. So we're going to take a few minutes to do that now. Okay, welcome back. What I'd like for people here in this audience to do as we come back, I'm already seeing that you're writing down pieces on a Post-it note. Maybe it's a few ideas, maybe it's one. What I'd like you to do is we're going to do a lovely total physical participation technique, and I want everyone to write at least one thing down on a Post-it, and I want you to, like a horde of zombies, hopefully not like that, I'm just kidding, to come up to this lovely poster up here and put one idea on our little ideal graduate poster. Let's do that now. and try to get it done as quickly as possible. Just get up out of your seat and put one thing on that poster. Please do not trample. Please do not hurt each other. Okay, people are finishing up the wonderful ideas over here, so I want to go back and explore what you've shared. And I'm already noticing, again, the lovely Twitter sphere has been sharing a lot of the same things. Some things I'm seeing on Twitter include risk takers, problem solvers, being able to persevere, aware of the part they play in the world around them, builds interrelationships, seeks growth, has drive, and has a skill set. I'm seeing a bunch of that. So let's see what we've got over here on this lovely poster. I'm seeing a lot of the same things. I'm seeing risk taker. I'm seeing resilient, respectful, happy. Wouldn't that be nice? Confident, balanced, know their strengths, no fear of failure, globally aware, respectful, people skills, a lifelong learner, resilient and responsible, confident, that we're all in this together, a curious individual, metacognitive, a problem solver, and ethical. So these are all wonderful things. And this is not a new conversation. We've had this conversation for a while. There are people that write books on this and make lots of money. Like they write these books, oh my goodness, I want this for my kids. And we all smile and we all pat ourselves on the back and then we do nothing about it. Okay? So I'm not about that. And so remember that picture I showed you earlier of me doing this, you know? This is where I get a little, okay, people. And I ask you the question, do you really want it? Like, really? Because we say we do, and we kind of go, oh, yeah. And then we just kind of walk the other way, and it's like we have that nice little conversation, and we feel good about ourselves, but we don't do something. So that drives me crazy. So what I'm going to be saying to you is also this. Let's commit to this. Let's commit to doing this for kids. So what does that commitment look like? Like, let's be really practical about that commitment. So if we're really going to do, and make sure we have this ideal graduate, there are a couple things that we have to do. We have to make sure that the learning environment we put students in demands these skills. So for example, if you want your kids to collaborate, you know what that means? They're going to have to do that in the classroom. I know, what a revolutionary idea that is. What, you mean do the thing we say we want? Wow. Example, if we want them to solve problems, then guess what? They're going to have to solve problems. Okay? You know what that means, teachers? You can't solve it for them all the time. Now, we're all good, nice people. Really nice people. And sometimes that gets in the way of what kids really need. So there's a fine balance between scaffolding and creating learned helplessness. So when we talk about PBL, we try to find that balance. We try to build this in our students where we provide opportunities for them to problem solve, be creative, build their confidence, critically think, all of those good things we want. You know what else we do in PBL that's very important? We teach and assess those skills. So we're all really good teachers here at teaching and assessing our content. That is a skill set we have. We became teachers because we love that content, right? And that helps, right? If I love social studies, like that will translate. If I love physical education, that will translate. So we're good at that. But are you good at teaching and assessing collaboration? Are you good at teaching and assessing creativity? And I do mean that. Yes, you can teach and assess creativity. You can. I've written a couple blogs about it, and other people have written articles about it. Because you can't just do this to kids. Let's say I want a kid to be creative, and I go up to this wonderful child, and they're working on being creative, and I say, be more creative, go. So not helpful, so not going to build what I need, right? That's not going to help. And I remember that in school where they say, you need to work on working well with others. Fix that. Okay, how? That's the key. So if you go to our website, by the way, bie.org, where we have some resources, I'll say that again, bie.org, we have rubrics for these things, which clearly articulate and break down what is creativity, what is critical thinking, what is problem solving, like what is collaboration, like breaks it down. Like whenever you create rubrics for math and you break it down. Now we need to do the same thing for this. And students need to know what that looks like, feels like, and sounds like. And that's why you need a good rubric to do that. You can't just tell a kid you need to be more collaborative. They need to know where they are in that journey and where they need to go. That's where the teaching and assessing of these things come in. Now, some might say, well, hold the phone, Andrew. I'm a little nervous about that. I got content I got to cover. I got to hit that content. I have 1 year, and I got to cover that content. And I say this. How's that coverage model going for you? How's covering going? And most teachers would go, I don't know. So first of all, let's not do coverage. Let's do uncoverage. That's the word I like to use instead. And to be honest, I can't do this with nothing. As in, be creative with nothing. That's impossible. So you have to have something with which to be creative or collaborating on or being a curious individual, and that is where content comes in. That's where the content comes in. So it's about both, because I can't do one without the other. So people say, is this taking away from content? No, it's enhancing content. It's enhancing the learning of the content. And so when we design PBL projects, we leverage both the content and these 21st century competencies, that you might call them, in our projects. It's about both. It's not about one or the other. So moving forward, I do want to give you a window into what you can expect on the 3-day journey around project-based learning. What does it look like? What happens, to kind of give you a window, and to tell you a little bit about the Buck Institute. They're based out of Novato, California, and they started back in the day from a large trust fund. And from that trust fund, it was a very broad journey. It was going to be to make things better in California, in Marin County. That's a pretty big goal. So they focused on education, and they started creating what you may have seen, problem-based or project-based economics units. These were curriculum units, and they gave them to teachers, and they used it as research. And they said, is this really good stuff? How do we know whether or not these project-based economics units are going to be effective? And they did the research, and they found that students were learned more. With the same type of exam and assessment. You had a group of students that took that curriculum, and then you had a group of students that did not. And the group of students that had the project-based curriculum outperformed this group, particularly in the area around prompts or questions that had to do with problem solving, critical thinking, applying in a new context, scenarios, deeper learning, as opposed to just the rote facts around economics. But given a scenario, what would you do? Or is this a good idea? Or how did this come to happen? So that's really what it's all about. And there's plenty of research on our website that you can go to and read as a light read on a Friday evening and enjoy. But it is there to support that the work is there. So I want to show a video now. I want to show a video of a sample project. There are so many projects out there. I want to launch with a project just to give you a window into what happens when a school really takes PBL to the next level and embraces it as one of the most important parts of their school. So I'm going to start this video and ask you a couple questions afterwards.
actually putting its DNA into your cells. And so unless all your infected cells get killed, you're just going to keep making it.
So we can, very good, amazing.
Students in Blair Hatch's class are learning about physiology and multimedia.
You need to find a good picture of an antibody binding with an antigen.
When class is over, they walk just across the hall where they study art with Jeff Robin.
An easy way of making it look three-dimensional is to give everything a little bit of a shadow, like on the arm and on the blood, everywhere, okay?
The students are working on one project in both classes,
Have you found good sources?
We have 10 sources right now.
and it's all about blood.
All of our classmates are studying different aspects like the art of blood in religions and, like AIDS.
The blood project is something that students will specialize in. Doing art around it, doing research around it, and presenting that research in an audio-visual format on DVD. What's going on here?
That's a fat that builds up.
Students are creating multimedia exhibits that will be displayed at a local art gallery and will promote blood donation.
So let me tell you a little bit about the blood bank.
San Diego Blood Bank Director Ramona Walker visits the class to provide background information.
Has there ever been a time where the blood supply has been really low?
Well, yes, actually.
It's much more engaging when you do it this way and when you actually get to do the project and create something at the end and not only teach ourselves but teach the community.
And maybe you could put what it's about in that same kind of text here, and there
I see what
to
you mean.
balance it out.
Robin makes sure students get their hands on every phase of the project, guiding them through the design and construction of the dioramas.
So you can come in sideways into that. This is something that I think is real life. If they're going to get a job when they first get out of college, it's going to be doing something visual. It'll be something to do with the computer, and they're going to have to do something for their bosses to put together a presentation. And that's what this is about. Did Blair approve those writing things?
Our scripts?
Yeah.
He hasn't looked at it yet, but I mean...
Show it to him before you start writing on this.
This complex project has many interlocking assignments and deadlines to keep track of.
It's so complicated, and planning it, just making a calendar, what you're going to do every single day for a whole semester. With this, you have to be right on it, or all hell breaks loose.
Hatch posts the curriculum on the school's website, and students turn in their work as part of their digital portfolio.
They don't hand it to me, they post it, and they keep it as in their sort of virtual locker. The advantage of that for me is that at the end is you're going to see what this student did week 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down the line, so it's real process oriented. They'll send me a link to their DP every 2 weeks. It's the same link, but by sending it to me, they're saying they've updated it and they're ready to be assessed. So I assess it by going and finding the things that are due. That's how we communicate, that's how I keep the student accountable. They're going to meet with you on Wednesday for posters,
Right.
and then meet with me on Thursday for visual scripts.
Well, that's right, tomorrow.
Hatch and Robin meet every morning to coordinate the project.
The fact that we have teachers coming in here an hour a day before the kids is the unseen structural feature that really makes this place work. We're trying to create an environment where all of our adults are engaged in learning together.
You like the way the poster is, therefore we have the art.
To get him to want to be partners with me and to do this, I learned about iron and oxygen. So most teachers don't go out and learn another subject area, but you have to do that when you do this team teaching, project-based learning.
The heart has to pump constantly. So it's important that you know what the other guy's teaching, but that makes you a lifelong learner as well, and then that's a good role model for students to see.
Yeah, I like how it bounces back and forth.
I've learned a lot about my own teaching practice by being interdisciplinary and thematic with another professional. It's creative, so keeps me on my toes.
That is one example of a project at a school that has truly embraced project-based learning. And I know it's easy to look at that example and go, whoa, hold the phone, Andrew. I don't know if I can do that right now. And absolutely not. That's not something you would jump in and do as your first project. Oh no, do not do that. I'm telling you not to do that. But what I am going to ask you is this question. This question that we're doing, this is a driving question, and every project has a great driving question with it. So I'm actually going to pose it to you all and ask you this question on how can I plan effective projects for my students? This is actually the question that we uncover together in the 3 days together. We're going to start that process now. So here's what I want to ask you to do at your tables. I want you to talk and ask, what do you need to know in order to answer that question? What do you need to know in order to answer that question? Go ahead and do that now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as you finish up your discussion, I'm going to cut it a tiny bit short. I want you at your tables to select your top 2 need-to-knows. What are maybe some top 2 burning things that you need to know to answer these driving questions? Come up with just 2 for now. What are your top 2? Come to consensus. Okay, so here's what I need you to do. I'm going to ask for volunteers. You've hopefully come up with 2 really good questions that you need to know. As you know, we have mics at the opposite ends of the room, so I'd like for maybe one person, if you'd be so brave, to go up to the mic and share your 2 questions. I'm going to record these 2 questions because they're super valuable. So let's go ahead, and if you have 2 questions, 2 need-to-knows, go ahead and line up at one of the mics, and I will record that question. Go ahead.
Okay, we were at our table, we were talking about that we need to know the students' interests in order to plan an effective project, like what they want to learn about, and also some good questions that we need to ask them and to ask ourselves in order to do some research on the project that we might be learning about.
Students need to know the criteria of which they're being assessed even, and they have to have prior knowledge.
Design, so keeping the end in mind, where do you want to take it, how are you going to assess it, and then from there you can work backwards and think, okay, how are we going to get there? And then also the types of learners you have and their interests as well. So not every classroom is going to be the same, not every student is going to be the same, so it's all about what types of learners you have and how you're going to accommodate all of them.
Anything else? Any others? Okay, good. What I'm doing right now is I want to be very transparent. I am modeling what you do with kids. I can't be any clearer than that. When you launch a project, you launch with an entry event of some sort. You give them a driving question, and you ask them, what do they need to know? I asked you the same thing, and you told me this. And then now, if I was going to be doing this workshop with you, let's say we had 3 lovely days together, I would be helping you to answer these questions. So in the workshop, we would talk about what are our students' interests and how do we leverage that. We would talk about how do we figure out what a good big question would be, or what are the criteria for assessment, like so that we get the learning that we need to see. What is the prior knowledge that students have when they enter this project? How do we backwards design a project for that matter? And of course, what are the types of learners we have in our classroom, and how does that impact the projects we're trying to create? So I am modeling what you do with students. And this is a very different shift for using projects, right? And one of the metaphors that we use when we talk about project-based learning is this idea of making the project a main course and not a dessert. Too often our projects are dessert. Too often they're fluff at the end. Too often they do not get all the learning that we need. We try to not do that in our projects. And by starting with the project like we just kind of modeled here, you're going to get better learning out of your kids. And also, now it is more student-centered because the questions are coming from the students. P.S. I already knew you were going to come up with those questions because I'm so smart. No, because I designed the question that way. Because I designed the project to go down a path, an open path, with multiple places to go, but still with some very clear directions and clear objectives. That is the biggest thing that we have to remember about project-based learning. But again, I'm trying to model. So whenever you do this, you always need to ask. You need to ask your students, what do you need to know? What do you need to know? And you need to return to this list all the time. Because you know how it is. You learn a little bit about something, and you have a new question. Or you learn a little about something and you get it wrong. So therefore you have to ask something else. So this is also a tool for inquiry, and it serves as an assessment tool to check in and see how students are doing along the way. Now, I know that one of the major goals here is to work on formative assessment. This is a formative assessment, okay? Being really transparent around that. So the next step I'm going to do is, I don't want to give away to everything around PBL. Instead, I want you to be a little bit more of an active learner in this process. So hopefully everyone at the different sites have different copies of some sample projects. So everyone here, I've got 3 different sample projects for you. The colors of the sheets of paper, I have a nice blue piece of paper, a nice lavender or purple, and a nice green piece of paper. These are 3 sample projects that I have done. What I would like you to do is this. I want you to look at these samples and ask yourself these 2 questions. It's kind of a preview into project-based learning. We've got all kinds of people here in this room, some who have done, maybe have no idea what I'm talking about. Some people says, I've dabbled a little bit in this, or I've done partially a little, maybe a little bit, but not quite. What I want you to do is look at these projects. What are you noticing? What are you noticing about these? And what are you already seeing as some of the distinguishing features? Like, what has to be in a PBL project for it to be effective? Go ahead and do that now. We'll take a few minutes to uncover what's going on. One thing I'm noticing about PBL is, based on what you're saying, totally, no, totally. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to debrief this a bit. I want to debrief this a little bit, and what I'd like you to do is, as you know, we have the microphones. I've already voluntolded. Is that a word? I made that up right now. I voluntold a few people to get up and share. Again, what are you noticing? What are you kind of like, oh, this is like making inferences. It's like we're being a detective here. These are some sample projects. What are you noticing? If you want to say something, go ahead and go to one of the mics. Go ahead and stand up, and I may add a few ideas here. Please. We've got somebody over here. Thank you.
Okay, so what we noticed was that we loved the driving questions and the big ideas, and how that was like one of the first things we saw, and how specific it was, and it displayed the role of both the student and the teacher, so you knew what they needed to do, but you also knew what you needed to do, and how actively engaged everyone is in the process. It's not just the students, it's you as well as the teacher. You're facilitating them, yes, but you can also be engaged in it. It also shows both formative and summative assessment, which is great, and it just shows the goal of where you want them to be, and how they get there is up to them. So again, the backwards design, we really like that.
So we're already noticing some things that we were maybe hoping for PBL and seeing it in there, like the fact that it's backwards design, the fact that it's grounded in some very specific learning, the fact that we are approaching big ideas through questions. Would anybody else like to share something? And again, if you're at home, you may share on Twitter as well. Yes, sir, please.
We had all of that as well, obviously, but we also really thought that,
Obviously.
the fact that the questions were authentic and real world, and the projects were very open-ended.
Great. So I heard open and real world, and that's really what this is about here. We're talking about real world problems, issues, projects. It's all about that connection to the real world and a level of open-endedness. Now, as I was circling around talking with tables, we were talking about what that might look like, and it's going to look different every project. It might be really open. It might be a little more narrow. There might be more choices. There might be less choices. It depends, because as you said, it's all about knowing your students. What are your students ready for? What might slightly challenge them but not overwhelm them, right? I would never go to a kindergartner and say, here, kindergartner, here are 10,000 choices. That's going to scare one, so we have to find the right balance. At the same other level, thinking a little bit differently. So I went and started teaching at a PBL school where we had some ninth graders. And these ninth graders had been in the system for many years. And I decided, well, they're ninth graders. They're young adults. They can totally handle some really great open-endedness. And boy, was I wrong. And I realized that even older kids need that scaffolding around voice and choice and open-endedness, because some of them, let's be honest, have been in a learning environment that has been so narrow and so closed for them that asking them to have choice is like a whirlwind hitting them in the face. So we have to know our kids, and we have to know where they're at and in terms of that growth. I'm just going to check the lovely Twitter sphere and see if there's other pieces in here. Somebody is noticing that there's collaboration, communication, and research and presentation. So they're seeing what some might refer to as those 21st century competencies already in the projects. There's just seeing that there's differentiation based on that knowing your kids, maybe you can give them a choice that might meet their needs in terms of their learning, and that, I'm just going through it really quick, that it's that there's an element of student-centeredness to this, that there's a balance between the fact that I am a teacher and we have to meet these curriculum outcomes, right? We don't really have much choice there. But how we get there and how students get there, that is where we can navigate. And when we talk about what you can do, when it comes to education, you operate with what you can control, right? We still have things that we can control, and I think PBL can meet that need. I'm seeing that there's a lot of scaffolding. Somebody's saying that there's a lot of scaffolding in a project, right? We're not just, and I made this first mistake on my first project. Okay, kids, go. It's experiential learning. You will learn it by doing it. And that was crazy. And so again, I'm just being transparent about my myths and my misunderstandings of this, and that I had to learn that, you know what, I wasn't quite on ball for those first projects. It's much more scaffolded. So let me see if there's any last ones, just to be clear. There we go. So those are some really important key takeaways. To continue with this conversation, I'm going to give you a window into what are some of those elements of PBL. Now, when you come to the 3-day workshop with me, we dive really deep on the first day into these elements and really uncover, these elements and not just cover them. So what we're going to do for that is there is a project-based learning essential elements checklist that you should all have, hopefully back at your sites. And it is a yellow-looking sheet. And you can feel free to share some of these things. And on it, I want you to take a minute to read it by yourself. What are you seeing in terms of some of these 21st century competencies? And then we'll move into looking at a video around it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to come on back. Hopefully you got to at least preview, skim and scan the checklist. Now I will say this. I do have a rubric for projects, but I don't want to overwhelm you. If you want to see a rubric for projects, like is it a good one that's a little more detailed, we do. Again, you can go to the BIE.org site and download it. It's there. But so I wanted to start with something a little lighter. I didn't want to go didn't want to scare you. You know how rubrics are. I always talk about, like, when do you give rubrics to students? Not on minute 1. That would scare me. You got to give it at the right time. And I don't think right now is the right time. So we're going to start off with a checklist. So on this checklist, you'll see some of these elements of PBL. Also, I just want to honor the fact that I have been watching the Twitter feed, and I am seeing some questions. And so I will make sure to fit in some time. I'm writing notes to myself, and I want to answer those questions. So those who have tweeted those questions, I want to respect that and say thank you for the questions, and I will make sure to bring that up. So, first steps, what we're going to do is we're going to watch another video. This one, I believe, is a middle school example. I know it's so hard. We only have this time together. I will be unable to show you examples like everywhere, but I will talk about where you can find more examples, videos, all kinds of good free stuff so you can see what this looks like at different grade level. So let's watch this project sample together.
Hey, is this the place where you can get a job to make people sick? And the guy's like, yeah.
Students in Scott Comstock's scientific communications class are critiquing the product of their semester-long exploration of the role of bacteria in the health of soil.
Okay, now warm feedback.
I like how he asked for a job to make people sick, because you wouldn't normally think that, but since the bacteria does that, it makes sense.
Each student produced a unique soil superhero pamphlet which integrated science, art, history, math, language arts, and multimedia. A team of 7th grade teachers at King Middle School began planning the project during a 3-day summer session.
At the beginning of every expedition, we usually look at a district calendar to see, what we're going to be doing for the fall. Then we start zooming in a little bit on exactly what it looks like from September through, say, December. And we'd X out some days we wouldn't be here. And then we'd kind of, what I like to call maybe bracket the time of a kickoff through the culminating event and the celebration of the final product. This is where we start as a staff, is creating the model before we ask the kids to do it. So essentially we kind of run ahead 7 to 9 weeks in advance and figure out what exactly we're going to build. So here's a good example of an informational pamphlet around bacteria. There's like a science piece around metabolism, and that's a science content piece. Here's a math piece around size of their bacteria. This is a multimedia piece where the kids have drawn their work, characters, text, and background, and then they would scan it and then they would bring that in. So we did that first to see how challenging that would be for the kids.
Do we have some flexibility?
The scientists they were all like, whoa, sure, we'll come. So they're all very excited to do this.
In expeditionary learning, we love to develop relationships between the students and community members, because the excitement that it generates in the students deepens their learning and lengthens their retention.
There's a word that you might not know, the word is soluble. In other words, it's able to be dissolved by water. Ruth contacted me and says, I want to do this thing with the kids about soil bacteria, but I don't know a lot about microbiology. So we sat down over the summer and we probably taught 7 or 8 hours, and she read microbiology textbooks, and she did a lot of learning on her part.
One of our ideas was to create a comic to kind of jazz up and make bacteria colorful and exciting for the kids, but to also teach them about the benefits of bacteria in soil scientifically. And so we brought in an expert who showed them how to make something come alive through illustrating it.
Today we're working with Annie O'Brien, a comic book artist, and she's teaching us how to make expressions.
They can be a line.
And we learned how to draw some eyes and some mouths so we can make good facial expressions.
And they would start storyboarding out different ideas to start coming up with this little story about habitat and setting. So we're taking the content, making it exciting for the kids, and having them make a mini product like in a comic life situation on a laptops. If they're creating a character for their comic life, they'll do something like this. They'll blackline it, they'll color it, they'll scan it, and then we'll pop it over here into a folder called drawings, and then here's their character and here's their situation. They can go over that on the district server, bring it back to their workspace on their desktops, and start to manipulate that. As we get so much digital information in the computer, we have to start organizing it. So typically we'd have something like this that we'd create, where we'd have a major folder, and we'd have social studies, science, math folders in that, which would house the social studies information, the science information. So when it was time to create the product, we knew exactly where to go.
Do you guys know how to get to the King Middle School website?
Yeah.
It doesn't work well when you ask kids to learn new technical skills at the same time you're asking them to master content. So what we do is we scaffold it so that we're asking them to learn a new set of technical skills around content that isn't hard for them. We might ask them to produce an organizational structure around shooting letters of the alphabet in the building. It's content they already understand. Scott asks them to learn the file structure that they're going to use in their final product for their expedition well in advance of ever thinking about how bacteria and pamphlets are going to be put together. So it's a matter of being smart about how you plan your teaching, scaffolding, collaborating with your team members, and giving kids the confidence to build meaningful products around deep content.
And when I ask the other students to move out, you're going to slide into their spot, open up, and show the scientist your particular piece that you're working on improving.
During the learning expedition, students present their work and get feedback from outside experts.
Okay, a denitrifier is a superstar when bacteria collect organic nitrogen formed in the biosphere. That's correct. And then it breaks the compound down to decompose it. I like how you're breaking the sentences up and making it really easy to understand.
As part of a culminating event, students distribute their pamphlets to local garden centers, universities, and at the main flower show.
There's assessment embedded in everything that we do all the way along, but that final product is out there, and it's going to be celebrated, and it's going to be shared with the community, and it's exciting. You know, we get to hold the kids to that. we get to hold ourselves to that. And someone said once, if it's worth doing well. And that's kind of our thoughts around that. Grammar, spelling, punctuation, we'll just think about those things.
Okay.
And thank you very much, Kaylee.
Okay, so what I would like you to do, actually, I'm going to jump back to this slide here, is think about that project and assess that project. How did it do in terms of those elements? Now, the challenge of this is it's a short video, right? We don't see every moment of the project. But feel free to make some inferences or guesses or check off, I'm not sure, or I really see that. It was really clear to me. So go ahead and do that. Okay, we're coming on back. So I'm going to be transparent with you all about the choice I made. Walked around, heard some really good discussions. And what I heard was, well, this area was really good. For example, wow, that public audience brought in along the way some experts. I saw some revision and feedback, and then I heard some people saying, I didn't quite hear a driving question. Did you hear that? I didn't quite hear that. Or, the inquiry seemed a little surface level. Like, looks like a lot of just facts. So I did that intentionally. I wanted to show you that there are projects out there. When you do that project, that was a good project though, right? It was a good project, but there's always something to improve. There's always something to improve. And I'm sure as you talked at your tables after that, you probably went, what if they did this? Or I might do this instead, or maybe I do this question, or I might change and offer more choice, et cetera, and that's how it is. So when you implement your projects, your first project will not be that beautiful dream necessarily that you have in your head. You will institute it, and you will go, you know, it went really well. I think, and you'll ask yourself, is this worthy of keeping? Like, should I, continue on a journey with this? And think about, I'll make some revisions, and I'll continue with this next year, and we'll see how it goes. Or you might trash it. I do that all the time. I do something, and I'm like, I will never do that again. That's just how it is in teaching, right? We do things with kids, and we go home. We might cry a little and have one of those moments, and then we come back and say, I know what I need to fix. I got it. It's all good. So that's how it is. Like when you design these projects, I did that intentionally so you could say, wow, there's always something to improve upon. Even though the project in and of itself, at the core is really good. There was some great learning in there, with some great critique, some experts, there was some great research, some great, choice, but we could maybe improve a little bit. So I want to share with you some examples right from here. Right from here. I had a 101 last week. I just can't seem to leave Edmonton. I think I need to buy a second home up here or something. I like it up here. But I want to share some examples. So to those out in the Twitter sphere and those watching at home, thank you for letting me share your projects, because these are ones that teachers designed with me last week. And I just want to share with you kind of what you can expect so that when you go, oh, I could do that, or really, or maybe say to yourself, wow, I could create something like that, yeah. So we do a gallery walk on the second day of the 101, where what you do is you come with your project idea and you go, this is what I'm thinking. Is it good? Like, am I crazy? What could I fix? What's good? What might I do a little bit differently? So this is one from grade 2. And there's, as you know, there's a lot of opportunity to integrate in projects, right? You can hit multiple outcomes. And in this case, we were doing some math graphing skills. We were doing some science content on changes, stains, and plants in the water cycle. So really really good math and science-based project. And what they were doing is they were trying to figure out how do we grow like the best super plant ever, almost like super gardener style, like getting out there and like doing that. And they would present that to actual gardeners and say, here's what you need. We're here to help you grow that plant and make sure that it really is like the best, most nutritious, longest living, will not die, type of plant, right? And so that's one project. And this is a project that can be used and improve, that. You'll notice the driving question is very kid-friendly. A kid can read that and pretty much know where we're going, right? So that's just one sample that I want to show you. I'm show you a couple more. Here's one in grade 9. And again, this one's more of we were talking about some social issues here. Teenagers, we love our teenagers, those adolescents. Wow, right? So this one's all about helping teenagers cope with societal pressures. And in it, they're reading texts that have to do with that theme, right? So there's a lot of great texts out there, books, young adult novels that deal with these themes. And those were the case studies. Like, what can we learn from these wonderful stories to inform answering this question? And in it, they got to choose between either some sort of how they would present that to the whole, and that was the group component, and then individual, they could do either a reflection or some sort of collage or poster, and they would include words and phrases on it. So as you said, there's both an individual and a group component in these projects, right? Because we want kids to collaborate, but at the end of the day, we also need to make sure that every child knows the content and skills that we need. And of course, we're working on narrative writing and speaking, and the other was other teens. This is about teens, right? So let's present to other teens, both in this class and in other classes that are going to do that project. Here's one for grade 11, okay? Moving up that, and I'm going to come back down again. So this one is primarily in socials, okay? We're talking social classes. We're looking at concepts of genocide, of ideological systems like totalitarianism, and we're going to look at ultranationalism. And in that, the products might be some sort of podcast or radio editorial around ending the cycles of crimes against humanity. Right? Like, how would we do that? And what are they? And what's going on around us? And they would look at different historical examples of that, whether we're talking about the Holocaust or we're talking about modern genocide, so I can fit in that lovely history content in there. And they get to do a blog or a letter to the editor of a newspaper, or maybe even larger audiences. Like maybe you send it into BBC. Who knows? I've had teachers do that. Like, you know what? I believe in my kids, and I'm going to send it. I did a project where I sent letters to our senator, our state senator, and I said, this is what you got to do. She wrote us back. And she sent in her legislative aide to come talk with us. You never know what's going to happen. You never know. We create these walls around public audience. Oh, I could never do that. Ask. The worst answer is no. And the best answer is who knows. So that's the thing. Let's break down those walls. We have technology to do that as well. And again, the public audience would be media outlets, the principal, and other students. And so we think about what that might look like. Here's a grade 3 one. And this one's a highly integrated project. This is a group of teachers that have already ventured into PBL a little bit and are ready for a next step. Most projects, when you start, you're not going to integrate too much. You kind of want to keep it happy and focused and, 2 or 3 weeks, just in these maybe 2 areas of content or 1 area of content on very specific outcomes. You don't want to do too much because you're a little nervous and maybe your kids aren't ready for it. But as your kids get more ready for it, and as you get more ready for it, you can integrate more. And with that, look at all the content we're doing in this project. Lots of great content. But look at the real-world impact of this project. They're actually going to do this. Okay, a new pedestrian bridge over something right here, local. How much more real-world can you get? So you're seeing already like this, and they're actually going to talk to an engineer and this, a city council and say, well, this is what we're thinking. These are the best ideas we have, and this is why it will actually be safe, and this is why we know that. Here's the math to support it, and we're going to work on our speaking skills in language arts, and we're going to get up and say, this is what I'm thinking. And they're going to show these lovely proposal or some sort of, they could choose between either a digital pretty model or they could actually physically make one like that. So there's a lot of opportunity here. I just wanted to show that teachers are already doing this work here. Teachers are already here in this district are also already doing great stuff. And I just like to show that because I want to honor the work that's already happening and also to give you some examples and say, I could do that. Or maybe I can't do, that whole big project, but I wonder if there's a way I might take it down a notch. Maybe I can make it a little smaller for my first one. I'm a little nervous about this, guys, so I just want to focus on something a little bit smaller. So let me tell you a little bit about what you can expect and some tools that you might do to start down this path. Before you even jump in and join me for 3 days of fun, you might go to our website and steal some things. It's okay to do that, all right? There is a project search function on the site that you can look up in terms of grade level, in terms of subject matter, in terms of where it came from, in terms of sources. There's lots of people that are doing stuff out there. I will say this, though, about them. What works in West Virginia, which is put some projects up there, or what works in Seattle, for that matter, may not work here. So you have to kind of look at all these projects with that grain of salt and go, okay, I like where this is going, but I need to make some changes. Or I don't feel like that's going to work here. Our students would not find that relevant. And you've got to ask yourself what's going to work. The other thing I would think is this. We do this funny thing when we look for curriculum out in the world, right? I go on the internet all the time and I'm looking for ways to, work, how could I teach kids this cool thing? And we always do this thing. We always search by grade level. Stop doing that. I'm just going to tell you, stop it. You know what you can do? You can look at other grade levels, see what they're doing, and say, I wonder what this would mean for pre-K, for example, right? Often the learning cycles or gets more cognitively different, from first to second. We hit a band, we're working on writing and persuasive writing, but I see what they're doing up there in 4th grade. I wonder if I can just pull this down a bit and make this work for my kindergartners. So think about that. Or vice versa, high schoolers, you might go, I wonder if there's anything at the middle school or elementary level that I could take and make appropriate for what I do in high school. Because we do some environmental science here, but we do it also in this grade. So hey, I'm going to steal that idea too. So look on the site. There's rubrics, blogs, webinars, videos, examples, all kinds of good stuff for you to get your hands dirty and try down this path. In particular, I want to show you one specific video. One of the, I think, biggest challenges for PBL is thinking about our parents and our stakeholders. And I mean that. And what do I mean by that? I'm sure even you, as a parent or an adult, when you hear the word projects, part of you might hurt a little bit inside. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that we've all experienced the older version of projects and they haven't gone very well. For example, I've done a project where the kid gets walked all over, or I'm stuck doing all the work, or this is just a pretty volcano that I made explode, right? Or I don't want to have to do all the work for my child, right? That's what usually happens with dessert projects, right? Take it home, mom does it, gives it back to the kid, they get an A. We don't want that. We do not want that. So what you can do is, this is a video that I think is pretty practical and really clearly, it's kind of silly, it's a little instructional, but it's a video you can show to your parents as well as to other teachers around it. It's called Project-Based Learning Explained, and it's on the website as well. So this is one of the last videos I'm going to show to you today.
You remember what it was like in school. It was boring. You sat in class, memorized as much as you could, and tried to pass a test at the end. But is that good enough? These days, school can be more interesting and effective by focusing students on work that matters. This is Project-Based Learning Explained. Most adults live in a world of projects. Whether it's a job assignment, home improvement, or planning a wedding, we need to actively solve problems. But unfortunately, schoolwork looks more like this than this. Let's take a look at this project-based world. Meet Claire. She was recently presented with a challenge. Her company, Super Suds, makes soap, and it was up to her to find the most earth-friendly way to produce it in the future. Her boss gave her a budget and a few requirements, and it was up to her to come up with a solution. She organized and managed a team who researched the options and created materials summarizing the issues. Claire's team asked for feedback and presented their findings to the boss. Claire came out of the project looking like a rock star, and she learned a lot about green products. If you look closely, Claire's success involved critical thinking, collaboration, and communication, things that aren't often taught in traditional classrooms. The world needs more Claires, so how do we get them? The answer is project-based learning, or PBL. By focusing students on a project, teachers put them on a path that deepens their knowledge and builds skills they'll need in the future. Here's what I mean. Mr. Simmons has always been a good science teacher, and his students do well on Friday's tests. Unfortunately, what they learned was gone by Saturday morning. That wasn't good enough for him. Soon he learned about project-based learning and decided to give it a shot. Mr. Simmons got the idea for his first project on microorganisms when nearly half of his students were suddenly absent with the flu. He asked his students why they thought so many of their classmates got sick at the same time. That lively discussion produced a lot of good questions and a list of things the kids wanted to know. Mr. Simmons then announced their project was to help elementary school kids understand, how can we not get sick? After dividing the class into teams, he got them started on the project. It was up to the students to ask questions, research, collaborate, give each other feedback, and figure out the best ways to make their points clear to children. One team chose to make an educational video on the connection between hand washing and avoiding the flu. Another chose to create posters to show how viruses spread. The project teams showed off their final work to an enthusiastic audience of parents and their children at a nearby elementary school. Sitting in the front row was our good friend and local rock star Claire, who saw a bit of herself in the students. It was clear that the project was a success for the students, the audience, and Mr. Simmons. His students practiced critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. The project wasn't about memorization, but learning in depth about viruses and how to prevent spreading disease, a lesson they will never forget. At the end of the presentation, Claire introduced herself to the students and told them that they were rock stars and that the world needs more people who can think like them.
That's just a sample video. Pretty, it's a little silly, but it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, you get it. Like, I feel like if you showed that to parents, and I've shown that to many parents, if they go, oh, okay, I'm getting it. I'm getting it now. I'm getting that they're learning something because they want to make sure kids are learning, and I'm getting that I'm building that the 3 E's as well as the other competencies around that. And they're working in teams, and they get to choose, and it's some good information. Like, this is something I would want for my kids. And so that's something that you might consider showing to parents, or at least providing a link. Sometimes at the beginning of the year, when I have new parents that maybe don't know PBL, I send a letter home and I say, hey, I do project-based learning in my classroom. And I just want to make sure you understand what that means, and I want to make sure that you don't think that it's those things that we normally think it is. Here's a video, here's a short reading, here's a blog that might explain it. I think it's so critical that we educate our parents, stakeholders around this if we're going to do this work to build those partnerships. And I got to tell you, when you start showing this video to experts and parents will start to come to your classroom and say, hey, I could support you in your project. You're doing a project on gardening? I love gardening. I'd love to come in and visit your kids. Or you're doing a project on viruses and bacteria? I'm a nurse, just saying. I can come support you. So the more public you make the work, the more you're going to get people to come into the classroom. So really think about how are you making your work public so that people go, wow, that's really cool. So to close up, we're getting really close to the time, so I'm not going to. I want you to be thinking about as you move out into this, how are you, going back to this activity, and I love this activity that you guys did initially around what are you already doing here to support this, and think about how PBL can really support getting here. In this case, how does PBL align with the Educate Alberta in 2030? How does it align? Because I'm sure you're already saying, but you really digging deep into how is it really doing it. I always think of it this way. PBL isn't what, it's the how. It's a model of instruction, right? It's a way to get kids to learn. It's not the what, necessarily. The lovely, beautiful image that we have, that's the what. That's what we want for kids. But we've got to make sure that we're getting them there with the right how, so to speak. So in addition to that, I want to remind you, resources are available, on the site, so feel free to look at all those different things. I also encourage you to go to Edutopia. I blog for them on a regular basis, but there's also a lot of other great bloggers who talk about PBL, and there's some great videos there too. There's videos about elements of PBL. There are sample project videos that you can go watch, and you might even continue to show those to parents and stakeholders. Instead of, if that instructional video doesn't work for you, well, say, hey, there's a project here that these teachers did there. So related to that, one of the questions was like, Andrew, I noticed you focused a lot on kind of the middle school and high school in this session. I will tell you, when you come to that 3-day with me, I definitely show like a 5th grade example. I show a pre-K example. And a lot of these examples I am taking directly from Edutopia or I'm taking from BIE. So there are different kinds of projects across all grade levels. It looks different, but it's still PBL. So with that, this is my contact information. You can feel free to email me any questions that you have. Follow me on Twitter if you don't. And again, I want to thank you for the long-term partnership that I'm here for. Like I said, I'm coming back a lot. Already have enjoyed working with teachers here. You guys get it. You really do. You get it. And now it's a matter of just getting our hands dirty and getting those things planned. So with that, I want to bid you a wonderful Thursday. Thank you very much.
And we thank all of you from Senior Fee Otterson for joining us today and being good sports. And also all of you out there who joined us, thanks for the Twitter feed. It was really rich. And for the pictures that you put on Twitter and the descriptions, thank you so much for joining us today. And please join me in thanking Andrew. Okay. Thanks so much, Ray.